This is Rick Rule for Rule Investment Media and the Rule Classroom, sponsors of the 2024 Natural Resources Investment Symposium, July 7 through 11 at Boca, Raton, Florida. Whether you attend live or whether you attend online, it's important to note that in the 50 hours that we bring you over 4 days, you won't have time to learn everything that you need to learn, nor know everybody that you need to know. We're doing pre-conference interviews with our exhibitors in an effort to give you more efficient use of your time at the conference. Remember, too, that every public company exhibitor at this conference is vetted, which is to say, I own all of them in accounts managed and owned by me. While my ownership of a stock, sadly, is no guarantee that it goes up, what it does mean is that unlike any other investment conference that I'm aware of, every single exhibitor has been vetted. It gives me great pleasure today to introduce to you a friend of long standing. Ross, you'll notice I didn't say an old friend, a friend of long standing named Ross McElroy, CEO of Fission Uranium, and somebody that I have known through two different uranium cycles spanning 2 decades. Ross, first of all, thank you for your ongoing sponsorship of our uranium education products going back 2 decades. And thank you in particular for your efforts on behalf of shareholders of Fission and predecessor companies where I was invested. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell our viewers something about your history and your team's history in uranium in the Athabasca Basin?
Sure. Thank you very much, Rick. And it is an absolute pleasure to be talking with you here again, and in advance of your conference, which we love to support. We think is fantastic. So you're right. Fission is no stranger to the uranium business. I'm no stranger to the uranium business. I've been involved since the mid 1980s, looking and hunting and for uranium in the Athabasca Basin, and still continue today to be doing exactly that. So Fission's has had a tremendously successful history of discovery in the basin. This is, the iteration we have now, Fission Uranium Company. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary on the TSX Senior Exchange, and in that time, we've made a world-class discovery in the western side of the basin on our PLS property, discovering the world-class Triple R deposit, of which we continue to develop today to, bring forward. We know this will be one of the near-term future mining operations in the Athabasca Basin. So happy to be here discussing.
Before we go into Triple R, tell us something about the team's past success, your successes and past successes. In other words, let us know that you know what you're looking for and you know what you're looking at.
Sure. Well, I mean, my background, I'm a geologist, and so I started in the uranium business, as I mentioned, in the mid 1980s. I worked for Cameco. I was fortunate enough. The first project I was put on was McArthur River, and we made the discovery of the absolute world-class McArthur River deposit, which is one of the most important uranium mines currently. A large high-grade mine, and involved in other discoveries later on with the French utility company Kojima. Now people would recognize it as Orano on the Shea Creek deposit area. And for Fission itself, this is our second discovery in the basin, in the Athabasca Basin. Now the team that I have behind us here at Fission Uranium has been the same team that led to our first discovery on our Waterbury Lake property back in 2010 on the J Zone, something that we were able to monetize and sell to Denison Mines back almost about 11 years ago, 10 or 11 years ago. And now, of course, the same team has discovered the Triple R deposit on the PLS project. And, it's a very large, significant, high-grade deposit that we're moving on. So you are talking about a team that knows how to make discoveries in the basin, significant discoveries, and move it along the chain ultimately towards being a producing asset. And I think and monetize for shareholder value. So I think there's a pretty exciting past history for us.
Let's talk now about Triple R. What is it? How big is it? What stage is it? And how do we move it forward and make money?
Sure. I mean, just speaking generally about it, it's a very large high-grade deposit in the western side of the basin. We've outlined over 130 million pounds of high-grade uranium. So the deposit averages just about 2% U3O8. So what would that be? About 20 times the average global grade of a uranium deposit. So extremely high grade, large, 130 million pounds. And really, one of the attributes that it has versus other projects in the Athabasca is that it's near surface. So it's the top of the ore body is 50 meters below the surface. And we've, and it's been hosted entirely in very competent basement rock, which has technical advantages. So it's, less challenging to develop a near surface mine in the right rock conditions. And so, we've continued to move it along the chain. We've, completed a feasibility study a year ago, and we actually now have visibility on, the timelines for production. So we're getting closer.
And just for our viewers to understand what 2% means, if you're assuming short tons, 2% is 40 pounds of uranium at about $100 a pound. You're talking about $4,000 rock. Contained in a package, a ton of that kind of ore is probably not a meter square. You're talking about stupidly high grade. Is that correct?
Stupidly high grades. I mean, there's probably, I can't think of another type of commodity that's actually more valuable on a per ton basis than a high grade uranium deposit. I mean, they're absolute phenoms of nature, and we're fortunate that our deposit is high grade. But the other aspect to grade, which is important, is actually the cost of production. And what we've seen in our feasibility study is that R promises to be one of the lowest cost operators in the mine. So on a per pound basis, we're able to get it out of the ground, process it, and sell it. So incredible margins between OPEX costs or even all-in sustaining costs, and ultimately what we're getting for the price of the commodity. So there's, it really in a fantastic situation here.
In terms of understanding what you have so far, what's the most advanced document? Is it a resource statement, a preliminary economic assessment, a pre-feasibility study, a feasibility study? Where is the document? What is known?
Yeah, so we submitted a feasibility study about a year ago. So we're now moving on from that. I mean, the feasibility study tells us all the economics we need. And so really it's part of the equation now for us to moving forward is getting it in through the permitting regime to be able to get approval from both the province of Saskatchewan, where the project's located, and also the government of Canada. So you've got both the province and the federal regulatory regimes that we need approval for before we can actually build out the project and get it to production. But it is quite far along that pathway towards being a producing asset.
And what did the feasibility study show us in terms of net present value, in terms of capital cost, and compare that net present value with the market cap? I think that's a really interesting story.
It truly is. So the feasibility study, first of all, was done at $65 uranium. Now that was forward-looking a year ago, Rick. When uranium was trading $50, we were projecting 65 for longer-term prices. That's long in the rear-view mirror. Uranium is now trading around $90 a pound on the spot, and in the low 80s, mid 80s in the term market. So substantially higher. Now the NPV at $65. After tax NPV was still $1.2 billion. When you approach $100, on our sensitivity analysis, we're looking at more than doubling the NPV. So we're probably like $200 or $2.5 billion after tax NPV at $100 uranium. So, it looks to be, it's extremely economically robust. There's no question about it. Our market cap, we're just under $1 billion Canadian. So we're looking at an NPV of, closer to 2.5 at today's current uranium prices. So yeah, it's a real discount.
And the way forward, is there more exploration work to do? In other words, are you concerned with making this deposit bigger? Or are you merely concerned, are you concerned with moving this thing through the regulatory process and putting it in production? What are the next steps for us?
So both, honestly. We know this project is certainly a sufficient size and has the economic strength to carry it forward as a standalone operation with knowing everything that we have, that we know just on the deposit itself. However, there's substantial growth on the deposit. It's still open on strike. It's open at depth. So having said that, we also know that the PLS property, it's very large, and the whole Patterson Lake corridor, which is the geologic conductive trend that the deposit is hosted within, remains extremely prolific. And so we are doing our regional exploration work as we speak in order to continue to evaluate different targets, both along strike and in parallel shear zones along the trend. We think there's a lot more economic high-grade uranium yet to be found on the property. So yes, the deposit is large already. We know it can expand because we have mineralization that's not yet in the mine plan, and a number of excellent regional targets to be testing that we think could lead to further discoveries. So we're kind of working on a number of fronts here.
One of the things that intrigues me about the development of the uranium market has been the incredible development in the spot market around, in particular, the uranium that needs to be contracted for new build reactors. And it occurs to me from talking to people in industry that small companies like yourselves, which would have had problems funding the upfront capital costs, now have the ability, if they need to pre-sell some of the uranium in long-term contracts with investment-grade counterparties, and using that to go to the bank. Can you comment on this new development with regards to the term contracts and the sudden availability of credit-grade counterparties?
Yeah, I mean, it's really quite interesting, fascinating, and it's something that we get asked about on a number of the meetings that we have with investors, is about forward sales and the ability to forward sell. And I'm really quite intrigued and open to the idea about it. I mean, because you're right, we have a capex of just over $1 billion Canadian to put this mine into production. We know the economics on the going forward are tremendously robust. However, that's a significant amount of capital required to build. So I think that these sort of discussions are definitely, they're out there. The possibility of being able to sell a certain amount forward, at least enough to help with the capital investment. That's something we're going to investigate. We're a little early in the cycle yet. We are still in the beginning on the permitting stage, or in the permitting phase. I think likely to get into advanced discussions with potential utilities, say that would be looking to buy forward sales. Might be a few months out yet for us, and we probably want to advance a little bit further. But it is, it's never too early to begin discussions there. And I think we have to be creative, obviously, to be able to raise the kind of capital required. But obviously, at a project like Triple R, it's imminently financeable. There's absolutely no question about it.
It's important that people that are listening to this interview understand that $1 billion upfront capital cost has already been accounted for in the net present value. In other words, there isn't double counting here. I want people to understand that. It's an all-inclusive number. Ross, one of the things that we've prided ourselves on for almost 30 years at the Natural Resources Investment Conference is the fact that every exhibitor is vetted. And what we like is for the ability of our attendees before the conference to zone in on those exhibitors that they think are of interest, visiting them even before the conference, certainly at the conference, and then keeping up with them after the conference. Who at Fission Energy, what living, breathing human being should people contact, and how do our attendees reach that person?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because I think you're talking to the guy right now. Please reach out to myself. You can access our general information portal through the Fission website at www.fissionuranium.com. Our contacts are out there. I absolutely encourage investors to get in touch with me personally. I'm more than happy to discuss the project, discuss the merits of an investment decision into Fission and where we think it's going. So yeah, please reach out.
Ross, thank you for your efforts on behalf of shareholders, myself included. Thank you, too, for your ongoing sponsorship of our uranium boot camps and the Natural Resources Investment Symposium. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much.